I welcome you all with love, and this is Parsha Beha'alotcha, which means, in essence, activating the flame. So what's going on? We are actually activating the flame. It's a very clear message. The first thing Aaron's told is about the menorah. Now, note the menorah. There's 7. Cycle of 7 for Shabbat. But more than that, one side is, in a sense, honoring the secular world, and the other side's the spiritual world. And what's in the middle? Everything points to the middle, because the base is the oneness of God. The base here, right? That's the key idea, is that everything we do, if we're in alignment, points back to God. Every action, every thought points back to God. And so Aaron is being instructed on what this is about. Also, he was having some problem because he was a little envious of the 12 tribes that got to make their offerings. God said, don't worry about it. You're getting something much bigger. What are you getting? You're getting the eternal message from God. And that's your job as a Levite, is to bring this eternal message throughout the ages. So that's a good start. It made Aaron feel better, of course. So what we have now is the menorah. It's not the same thing as a Hanukkah, which is 8. This is 7. 7, cycle 7. Everything goes to the base. What's the base? God. Everything is unified in God. Now, what he's instructed to do is light this every day. I'll be specific, every morning. I'll be more specific, in the direction of the south, from the direction of the south, because that's the place of holiness. And if people follow our Shabbat, we always have the light, the woman lighting the lights from the direction of the south. That's not an accident. So it's about that energy. So every morning, he's being instructed to light this. So what does that mean? The lighting of the flame of God every morning is the awakening to have a greater vision. Life is just not a materialist world, which is the battle we're having today. Look, Descartes said, we think, therefore we are. That's totally backwards. The Torah says, we are, therefore we think. What's that saying? It's when we contact the source of truth within us, the divine source of truth within us, it's from that our mind can operate. So, this in no way am I not validating the mind, but if it doesn't have its base, it can get really out of control. That's what we're really seeing today. So the mind is meant for wisdom, but the mind can also get greatly imbalanced, and people can come up with all kinds of things that create great harm and misery if it's not rooted in the Torah, if it's not rooted in the God. And that's the key of understanding about the mind. It needs to be rooted in God consciousness, or it can bring great difficulty. As it's really kind of taught, the mind is, I say, a source of wisdom, but in our world, because it's not so rooted to God, it's a source of disease. Think about that for a second. The mind, not rooted in God, becomes a source of disease and can be taken over by the dark side, which is what we're seeing in our society today. That's part of the real battle. Is God controlling our minds in the sense of from our source, or our outer forces or satanic forces taking over our minds? Key, when we light the menorah every day, we're reconnecting to the source of all creation. I'm going to put this down for a second. And now we go to a deeper level. So what are we talking about? We are talking about having a deeper vision. We light that. Now, how do we light it? The truth is, for me, it's in meditation. First thing I do, I'm lighting the menorah. And that gives me a vision that takes me beyond the material world. And this was meant to take us beyond the material world to see the world to come. So we're living in multiple dimensions immediately. And we're seeing the bigger picture of what really spiritual life is about. So lighting the Torah, as I say, for me, it's with meditation. We light the flame within ourselves. That's key. And then we create unity. So one of the other things we see about the menorah is, hey, there's 7 of these. There's not one way. So we're looking at true unity and diversity. Not, oh, you can be diverse as you want as long as you agree with me. No, that's not what this says. This says there really are different ways of knowing God, but they're all linked to the one. So that's a very deep message about, hey, we're unique individuals, we're put together in unique ways, and so we're going to have our own unique ways of knowing God as well as a general way at the base. Very, very important message that a lot of people forget about. I think they only have the right way, but the menorah says it really clearly. That was the message given to Iran. Hey, there are different ways, but they all have to go back to God if it's going to be valid. Okay? So this is part of the symbolism of the menorah. Most important, light up your connection with the divine every day. It's a really good way to start the day anyway. One of the really super nice things about meditation. Lighten up the menorah. Now, as that unfolds, we see different kind of, let's say, variations in the meaning. So we're now activated. We have a kind of a general awareness of seeing God in all things, sensitive to God in all things. In a sense, one of the messages here, when the menorah is activated, is the ability to experience God in all of creation. So people have different ways again. Some people go to nature and they feel God. Some people work hard and they feel God. Some people meditate and they feel God. Okay, but it all comes back to that. But the key here is we have different ways, and then it affects how we walk through the world. Now, I wish it were that simple. But one of the things I want to say is, when we're walking through the world, we begin to experience the whole world as an expression of God. Some people joke with me because I'm very symbolic. I'm thinking about everything. What am I doing? I'm experiencing every moment as an opportunity to know God. Every moment. Now, I may not always understand that. Sometimes I have to think about it, like, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? So there's symbolism, but it's all about one thing. Seeing God in all things. And some of us, like me, like to go a little deeper, understanding God in all things. That's what I do. Not everybody's that way. Some people just like to walk in nature and enjoy God. That's fine. We all are different. That's the beauty of it. Even we're all different with different diets, which we'll talk about in a second. But the key for me is walking through the world, seeing the light of God in all things. And for me, all the symbols, all the events, everything for me is a message from God. And then the question is, am I listening? Am I paying attention? So that's one of the ways as how we look at it. It's like experiencing it that way. And listening to those messages. And my whole life is based on that. Sometimes I'll have what we call the divine, the voice of the daughter coming through, and we'll hear what's going on. Other times it's just more intuitive. It's making God's sense out of everything. It's what we have in common. It's like, do we have common sense is good, but God's sense is even better. Okay, and so that's a way of life. Okay, so that takes us a little bit to another piece of what Aaron was being told. So Aaron, again, was a little envious of the 12 tribes. But God's saying, Aaron, I'm using my language, wake up. You're the 13th tribe. You have a certain role. Your role is to be the spiritual leaders. Your role is to always light up God and help everybody else remember it. Other people's roles may be in commerce or in military. That's okay. But you got your role. You got to play it. So, since the firstborn lost their entitlement because they worshiped the golden calf, you are now my firstborn. What does that mean? Well, it means you're the firstborn sacrifice. So what does that mean for a Levite? It means, as a Levite, which I am a Levite. I think it's a Kohite, actually, as far as I can tell based on everything. I have 37 genes that are Levite genes. What does that mean for me? It means my life is dedicated as a sacrifice to God. And that's really what Aaron is being told by God. It's like, okay, you're now the firstborn. You are the sacrifice. Now, we're not talking about sacrificing at an altar, okay? Don't misunderstand that. We are talking about the sacrifice is your life, as I see it for myself, is a continual sacrifice to God. What does that mean? It means everything I do has to be focused on God. It has to be God-centered. It has to be activated in that way. So just enough of that, that's enough to begin with. Just to have that. And then from that lighting of the menorah within ourselves, then the light shines to inspire everyone else to take that God-centered menorah approach. That's what Aaron is being told. Is like, well, guys, it's got to start with you. You got to light the lights. Actually, you can do it if you need it. You need the symbol of the menorah. Okay, that's fine. But inside, we have to light the lights. And in that way, we begin to light up the world. Now, Aaron is kind of getting the message. You Levites are a little separate. Well, you're right. There's a very clear message here. You can't be a light to the world if you try to be like the world. I take it a little further. You can't take on the mark of the beast and be a light to the world. The mark of the beast takes on the thinking and the actions of the world. So, Levites always have to be separate. And I'm going to say this. Anyone interested in spiritual life, actually, who's seriously interested, really has to be separate. And so that's why I use a very interesting way. Touch, don't blend. What does that mean? It means we have to be connected to society, but we have to be really on the outside. Because it's only if we stay on the outside that we can actually share that light. If we try to be like everyone else, it doesn't work. The light gets, in a sense, extinguished. So we have to be separate so we can keep regenerating the light outside the mass consciousness and then help light up that. That is the role of the Levites. Now, I don't want to restrict it to just the genetic Levites. Anyone who chooses to live this way, in my view, becomes a Levite. If we're willing to light up the menorah each day and share that light with those around us, you're a Levite. You're holding it, touch, don't blend. That's really key to this kind of a way of understanding it. So it's right there. It's very, very clear. This is how to for the Levites to relate to the other 12 tribes. Hold the holiness, Remind people of the holiness by your way of life, by creating your light. That's key. So Aaron now is really getting the understanding, and you are the firstborn offering, which is dedicating your life to bringing the understanding of God, bringing people back to God, keeping yourself focused on God, and making every action God-oriented. And also seeing God in all things, which is what I talk about, the walk in the world. We don't have a lot of examples of that. There's one great God-merged being that was so connected, it would take him an hour to walk 50 yards. Because he's experiencing the whole world. He's not alive anymore, but he was experiencing the whole world at all times. Think about it. Literally, it would take an hour. I've walked that walk that I'm talking about. It's a 50-yard walk. It would take an hour to get there because he's experiencing everything. So it is about keeping that focus on seeing and experiencing not just God and everything, but the messages of God and everything. So I think about that a lot. That's kind of my way of, it's like, what's God saying here? What's the message? That's why I'm sharing this Parsha at this level for you. I think about it, I read about it. It just takes time to get it all and to meditate on it. And I listen to what other people have said about it. So that's part of the understanding how we get it. So now we've got the menorah, we've got the Levites, in a sense, as the one chosen to play that role, touch, don't blend. And we have the idea of living as a sacrifice, as the firstborn sacrifice to God. Well, that's a pretty good start. So, now we have Moses in the desert. People are out of their comfort zone, and they're traveling. But what's the first thing people think about when they're traveling? What is it? Hey, what's for dinner? And that's exactly what we see going on. The manna has been given, which is a gift from God. It's a way of returning people to the basically live food, vegan way of life, as done in the Gan Eden. And people are saying, well, I want my fish from like I had in Egypt. Worst, really worst, they say, oh, and I'd like to return to Egypt. What is that saying? It isn't about getting some food, some fish and cucumbers from Egypt. It's about saying, I want to return to the dark side. I want to return to the source of evil that I knew in Egypt. Look, taking this deeper, okay, it isn't just about your food. We'll get to food in a second, but the symbolism of, wait, you're giving manna, you're giving me God? Well, that's not so uncomfortable. I'm here in this desert, and that's all I have to eat? So that's a battle that was going on, and that leads us to the graves of lust. It's a very important teaching here. So people are complaining, the fire of God comes down, all those people are burned up who are complaining, and then Moses says, okay, this is what you want. For 30 days, you're going to eat quail till it comes out your nostrils. And so, I don't know the thing, but there's just thousands of quail die. They have to eat this for 30 days. And at the end of that, those eating it get sick and die. We call it the graves of lust. Okay? And so they're buried there. But what's the symbolism? Well, first, if God's feeding you, you should pay attention. This is a gift from God. You don't want that gift? You want to go back to the way of Egypt and eating this way of life? Where does that take you? So if we kind of look with a little bit of science now, we can say, okay, there is a message. Take care of your soul. Take care of your health. Take care of the environment. Don't have animal cruelty. Feed the hungry. Build the collective energy. And eat in a way that returns you and helps you become, in essence, a superconductor of the divine. These are all the messages in this returning. So we have, after Noah, they didn't know what to do, and God said, okay, you can eat meat for the moment if you need to. But that is not a directive to eat meat. It's like, if you can't do any better than that, you can have a little meat. Hopefully you move back to God. This is what Maimonides said. Well, not everybody was ready to go back to the Gan Eden diet that they were being offered in the desert. Okay, and so I have to suffer from that. And everything I just said, people are eating this for 30 days. What does it do? Well, we're talking, depending on the type of cancer, up to 4 times more cancer, 4 times more osteoporosis, 30 to 50% more diabetes, 32% more heart disease, and it goes on and on. The message is, you want to eat the way the Egyptians did? You want to eat and kill life and disrupt the environment? You're going to pay the price. And that's actually what's happening in today's world. We can see, if we look at the resources, meat eating is a hoarding of resources. The amount of grain needed to feed 100 cattle can feed 2,000 people. So we have the global saying, well, there's not enough food for people. Well, that's just not true. There's not enough food if you're going to eat meat, but if you actually go vegan, there's enough food to feed the world 7 times over. That takes away the global satanic excuse. Oh, we got to kill all those people. We'll starve everybody in Africa to death. That's 130 million people. Like what's going on the shutdown. So that's kind of the thinking. It's totally bogus. We have enough food to feed everyone. We have enough food. Really, a vegan, plant-based thing only uses 5% of the land that's used today to grow food if you're using animals. How about water? Well, a vegan is going to, a plant-based diet is going to save a swimming pool full of water. Okay? That's a lot of water. Big Olympic-sized swimming pool. And it goes on and on. Yes, you get better health. Everything is uplifted. So it's interesting. And I'm going to just mention something about Africa because I'm connected to a lot of programs I'm doing in Africa. And the vice president of Liberia was here, and he's an agronomist. He's not the vice president anymore. And they have actually filled in the swamps. They have all kinds of gardens and farming that is literally feeding the people. So they're already ahead of the curve in terms of going vegan and feeding the country. So it can be done, and there are actually literally at the country level in Africa where it's literally happening. So people are a lot more aware and actually ahead of the kind of meat-centered nonsense that's still happening in this country and really in Europe and so forth. And I talk to people at high levels who actually understand exactly what I'm saying. And a little side effect, when I was in Nigeria, people were totally on after a certain, quote, helper came and vaccinated people and so many kids died. They understand this is not good. Vaccinations are dangerous. They also actually refused to take genetically engineered food. Oh, we're going to help you, but it's genetically engineered. No, we don't need your help. We don't need your genetically engineered food. So my experience with the Africans is, and I'm working 6 countries here, is that they're way more sophisticated than the globalists would think. So they're not going to be so easy to get rid of, in a sense, as the globalists are thinking. So that's a little side point, but I want to make a point is when you go vegan like this, it solves a whole lot of problems. So there we have that message. Go vegan. Torah message, go back. It's actually not go vegan. It's actually go back to the Gan Eden diet. That's what I gave you. The live food, plant-based diet. Not that complicated. Not everybody was willing to do it. Even with God speaking to them, even with God giving them manna. So we take a look at that and say, oh, okay, that's a powerful message that is coming through in this Parsha. Now, another level is that there was a need to spread the energy, what we call the Ruach HaKodesh, the inspiration of God. It's a really important need here. And so Moshe, with God, activated, like I'm going to call it, a group Ruach HaKodesh awakening for the 70 elders, and really 2 extra people who began prophesizing. So the power of prophecy was given, at least temporarily, to people. And there was a larger awakening of what's going on. And that's an important piece because it takes us into another level of understanding. And that understanding is that we all have the capacity. Yoshua was very concerned these 2 guys prophesizing, and Moses says, hey, I want everybody to be able to do this. Everybody should be dancing to the Ruach HaKodesh and be inspired by it. That's what this world is about. He didn't exactly say that, but that's the Messianic times. Moshe's totally tuned in. I don't want to be the only one. Let's spread it around. Let's everybody get it. So, very important message and where this is all going in the Messianic times. Now, part of that little story takes us to the criticism of Aaron and Miriam of Moshe. In the Torah way, being married and you're supposed to be having sexual relations. Moses wasn't doing that. And so they came to criticize him about the way he was treating his wife. And Moshe says, well, we have different levels of prophecy here. Now you're turned on, you're prophetic, but God speaks to me directly. And it's different than speaking through the veil of what we call most of, I'm going to say prophecy, but really the Ruach HaKodesh. And Moses says, and God has made it clear to me, I have to be ready at all times to receive that. Now, we know in our tradition, if you've had sexual relations, you're impure for 3 days, even though you take a mikveh and so forth, and then I would not be ready to receive the divine message whenever God shows up. So I have to be ready at all times. So I can't participate in that. And all kinds of things happen. Miriam, the cloud of God comes down. They get a very clear message that they're really out of order. And Miriam gets leprosy. And everybody freaked out, and Moses blesses her. The leprosy goes away, and then she has to be out of the camp for 7 days to purify. There is a message here I want to get, and it goes beyond Miriam. It goes beyond the idea of being ready to receive God at all times, meaning being celibate. It is a message that even though people have the Ruach HaKodesh, they're really not necessarily at the same level. So we have Moshe at this very profound level of the Ruach HaKodesh, walking with the angels, and we have others who get a taste of it, but they really haven't spent, like Moshe, so many years integrating it, elevating it, getting clear. So people are at different levels of the Ruach HaKodesh. So they're saying, well, we get the Ruach HaKodesh like you also, but not really, because they haven't integrated it. So there are different levels of enlightenment. We're not equal, because how many years, how much you've integrated, and Moses is saying, it's great, we wake everybody up, but we also need to have some degree of respect for the spiritual teacher who's been doing this for years and years and years, versus you just got to awaken. And I see that happen with people. With Haniha or Shaktipat, people, they get in touch with the Ruach HaKodesh, it's flowing, and they're at the first stages of integration, and it's very important, again, work in alignment with the spiritual teacher, the liberated spiritual teacher who's been doing this, and with the society, and with the kind of bigger picture so that it can grow. I have seen people kind of get a hit of it and then just go off and think they can do whatever they want. There's a person that's not alive anymore who actually went that way after he went to, got the Ruach HaKodesh from Muktananda, and then he just, I can do whatever I want. No, you have to keep centered and aligned with the great teachings and honor your spiritual elders. Now, one more thing that has to be said with this, and that's that there's always going to be mistakes. No one's perfect. And the Torah way of understanding the Messiah falls, gets up, falls, gets up. In other words, it's got lots of, let's say, falls or mistakes as the Messiah goes down into the world, descending in order to ascend. That's an interesting concept. You descend because you have to get a little bloodied. You have to make your mistakes as part of it. So the Jewish version of the Messiah is one who's been bloodied with a variety of mistakes, but still gets up one more time. Then he falls, or she falls, and is able then to be the Messiah with kind of going through all the human elements of that to truly get it. So that's really a part of, in a sense, the message. Okay, now that takes us to the final thing, which is important. They bring up what they call Pesach Sheni, Pesach Sheni, which means there's a group of people who are involved in burying someone, and so they were not able to participate in the first Pesach, and they came later and said, Moses, I mean, we're doing this job. We want to be part of things. So Moses created the message, okay, and he created a ceremony so they could be purified and so forth. The bigger message is the Torah message here, that when you acknowledge when you've missed the mark, and you ask for forgiveness, as these people did, so we have repentance, forgiveness, and then redemption. This is part of the Torah way. Why is that relevant today? I mean, that's a message, and what we see is they were redeemed. Because in today's world, people who are not connected to God they get the satanic teaching is, you made a mistake, you're guilty for the rest of your life, everybody's guilty. Okay? And it can't be redeemed, and the only way you can do it is bow down to some person seeking forgiveness, which is total idolatrous, satanic nonsense. But it's worse. It's not nonsense. It's cult. It means you're actually, when you're bowing down to an idol, to another person, you are actually bowing down to Satan. Not that that person's Satan, but you're bowing down to idol worship, and you're not reconnecting to God. The Torah, like this Pesach Sheni, really is saying, wait, all this can be fixed. You just have to be sincere. You have to, two things. You have to repent and do what you need to do and commit to following the Torah way, and then it works. So within the Torah, within these teachings that we see right here in this Parsha, the whole mechanism of redemption is there. If you are not connected to God, then you fall into the satanic way. Well, there's no redemption. You have to feel guilty forever. And we're going to decide you have to give your control away and give your life away to us because you're a bad person. That's not the teaching of the Torah. Okay? That's not the teaching of God. Teaching of God is we have the light of God within us. We are made in the image of God. And do we make mistakes? Of course. That's part of the growth process. So we have two forces going on. We have the satanic force, which says you're bad, you're guilty, you're separate. We don't talk about God. There's no God, and you bow down to us, and you join our cult, and so forth, which is explicitly the satanic way. Or we remember that God dwells within us, that we are made in the image of God, and the Torah has a explicit way of redeeming. So I leave with this message because it's so important in our society today is God sets it up where we can redeem. Because guess what? We're not perfect. Messiah isn't perfect. Okay? And so once we understand that we're part of God, all these imperfections, which are lessons that we learn on the spiritual path, are really part of moving closer to God, not away from God. As long as we're willing to accept we missed the mark and redeem ourselves and go back to the way of life of the Torah, which is designed to bring us to God, which obviously includes the Garden of Eden diet. So that's the final really important message here, is we are always redeemable when we make the right steps. Don't choose the way of Satan, which separates us from God. It creates us guilty. It's uneasy, kind of a totally illusory idea that you can't be redeemed. That's the way of Satan, explicitly. We can be redeemed. We have to return to God. We have to remember who we are. We are the light of God. And this whole Parsha comes back to we are the light of God. And where does it start? Lighting the menorah. What's the menorah tell us? Let's remember we're the light of God. So may you be blessed, everyone, to always light your menorah every day. Remind yourself in that way that we are meant and are the light of God with our image of God within ourselves, and then begin acting in ways and thinking in ways that's always connecting us back to the truth of who we are and celebrating that truth of who we are in all of creation. Shalom, shalom, shalom. And now we can go into a little meditation. Enjoy your meditation.